This was a video and it was titled, "I have a crush on a coworker, but I'm happily married. What does one do with attraction in and outside of marriage?" You did a video with this guy, "I've always regretted my marriage. Should I leave?" Do you buy that it's possible to marry the wrong person?
I think we live in a culture that has told us that happiness is somewhere else. There is no perfect marriage. It doesn't exist. Like, I don't feel like I love you anymore. Let that be the starting line, not the finish line.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Lila Rose podcast. Happy New Year. I can't believe we're in 2024. So many good things in store. Already it's off, I think, for a lot of people to a great start. Although I know some people are like, it's already 2024. I already feel like I'm behind. Okay, today's conversation, I hope, is going to be really helpful, encouraging, enlightening. It's on relationships. As you guys know, this show, we talk about relationships a lot. I think they're so important. The health of our relationships is really the health of our lives. First and foremost, our relationship with God, and then our relationship with other people, if we're married, our spouses, our kids, and, our family, whoever it may be. So today we have a treat. We're going to have Dr. John Delony on the show of the Dr. John Delony Show. He's a Ramsey personality, so he works with Dave Ramsey and his whole kingdom of content, which is really great. But he does some amazing stuff on relationships, and he has some great advice. He has years in academia. He's written many, many books. But he does this live call-in show giving people live relationship advice. And I think it's really sound advice that he gives. So we're going to tackle some big relationship questions about boundaries in marriage. We're going to talk about how to deal with attraction and desire in and outside of marriage. We're going to talk about how to maintain a healthy marriage and really build that 70+ year marriage with your soulmate, how that's possible, why and how divorce isn't the answer, and really walking through that. Can divorce make you happier? We're going to get into that and so much more. Hey guys, it's a new year, 2024. It's time for some new meat. So you can check out goodranchers.com to get your American meat delivered. It's very cool because goodranchers.com, which is sourced 100% from American ranchers, is best in class meat, poultry, seafood, and pork. And they have some amazing deals right now for the new year at goodranchers.com. You can subscribe to get your meat package that comes in with free expedited delivery to you and get free chicken for a year. And guys, their chicken is amazing. A lot of the chicken from the grocery store today, I think, is just flavorless or bland or stringy. Good Ranchers chicken is delicious and juicy. You're going to love it. So if you subscribe now, you get $189 value free when you subscribe in the month of January. So do not wait. Go check it out today. That's goodranchers.com. Use the code Lila at checkout to get $20 off your subscription and your free chicken for the year. That's the code Lila at checkout at goodranchers.com. John Delony, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm really grateful.
All right. So I first heard about you from, I think, YouTube sending me your videos because I like the relationship stuff. And then I'm a fan of Ramsey's, Dave Ramsey's whole empire that he's built. He's doing some really good work in the world. So first, for people that aren't familiar with you yet, what's the background on John Delony?
Oh, man. Background, I grew up in Houston. I was the son of a homicide detective and a stay-at-home mom. And then my dad quit being a detective about halfway through my life and became a minister. And my mom went back to school. And then at the age of 40, she took her first community college class. And then she graduated at 57 with her PhD and became a tenured professor at 63. So that's the house I grew up in. And then I've been in academics for the last 20 years as a dean of students and a professor. And then several years ago, I had a run-in with Dave Ramsey and his team. And I quit my entire career to become, as my 12-year-old says, "Dad, you're just a dumb old YouTuber." And that's what I do now for a living.
Not dumb. I think it's 1 out of every 4 Gen Zers want to be a YouTube star when they grow up.
Well, now I can't tell them that's a dumb job because, my whole life has changed. So it's a pretty good gig for me and my family. And so now I can't tell those kids, like, you get a real job, but it's a pretty good job. So
you were working respectably in academia and now you're making YouTube videos.
Exactly. I used to have a real job. No, I'm busier now than I ever was, but now it's just a totally different world. But in many ways, it's very much the same. So it's good.
All right. Well, what I want to get into in our conversation is some of the relationship live advice that you give, some really important stuff on marriage and boundaries and desire. It's really interesting stuff. It's very important, I think. But first off, what was you met Dave Ramsey. It sounds like he kind of gave you a vision of a different life. Was there something that wasn't satisfying you in academia, working that way, or some personal dream that you had that you're now living? What made the change for you?
Honestly, at the time, I mean, you can see it over the last couple of decades. Higher education has just changed. It's changed pretty dramatically on a number of different fronts. And so it was getting harder and harder to operate. At the particular school I was at, it was my dream job, dream position. Everything was great about it. I had 2 little kids. And so for me, I wanted them to see their dad in a world gone mad. I wanted to see their dad doing what he could in the tiny little sphere of influence that God had given him. This is what you got. And when I sat down with Dave and his team, they said, I'll never forget, Dave said, hey, you help thousands of people in a profound way. You can join this team and you can be a part of helping millions. And that was when I went home, and I remember telling my wife, for my son and for my daughter, I want them to at least see their dad get in the ring. And this thing may end tragically, and I have to go back and be a professor again. But I wanted them to see their dad get involved in hard conversations across the country and at least provide a picture of, here's another way to do life. Because the ones that we're being presented with all across the spectrum is just madhouse. It's just dumb. And so what's a different way to do life? And then ended up with a call-in show, and I wanted the show so badly to be about how smart I was and my smart academic answers about mental health. That's my training. My background is mental health and emotional health. And more it was about dealing with marriages and intimacy and raising kids and how do I deal with boundaries with my parents. And so over the last few years, it has absolutely taken a hard right turn to conversations about relationships that we're all struggling with.
Okay, so let's go there, because I think we talk about that a lot on this podcast, relationships, relationship health. And I want to start with one of the videos I saw that you did, which was a live call-in show. So you have this show, and these are callers that are just, I guess they watch you on YouTube and then they queue up and they just pour out their hearts on air.
Well, they call in from all over the world, or they write in, and then our producers craft the show, right? So there's just thousands of people who write in, and then they pick the 3 calls per show. But yeah, and I get one line is what my team will give me. They'll say, son has autism and intimacy issues with husband. And then that's kind of what I got. And then somebody calls in, and we have 10 to 15 minutes to try to figure out what to do next.
And these are real people who are calling in.
Oh, yeah, they're real people, and I've never met them, and most of the time I never have met them. There's been 1 or 2 times I've met people, like it's book signings and things, but yeah, it's just a touchstone. I'll tell you this, when they first started calling, I remember my instinct, because I'm new to radio, new to podcast, all that. My first question was, why are you calling me? You should ask your friend that question. And every single person, 100% of them said, dude, I got nobody. And that was a harrowing season for me, realizing how lonely people are, how many people are sitting at home in their marriages and their husbands or their wives have no idea how behind the 8 ball they actually are. And so, it's been an anonymous place for people to call in and ask hard questions.
Okay, so I wanted to start with this one. This was a video, and it was titled, I've Always Regretted My Marriage. So we're going to go right to some of the toughest stuff. Should I leave? And this gentleman calls in, and he's telling you about how he wasn't even sure on the altar when he married his wife, but he's in the marriage. And at first, I was worried that you were going to tell him to leave, because you were kind of like ribbing with him a little bit, like saying, hey, what do you mean you don't desire your wife? Who do you desire? What do you desire? You're kind of trying to get to the root of his desires. But then you laid into him with, there's trade-offs either way, basically, and what it would be like if he did leave his marriage. Can you share a little bit about what I don't know if you remember this conversation, by the way, with this guy?
I don't remember the conversation, but okay. I have it pretty frequently, whether it makes the air or not. Mm-hmm. I think we live in a culture that has told us that happiness is somewhere else than wherever you have to be, than wherever you happen to be, and happiness is a feeling, which is a complete and utter lie. It's nonsense. And so what I always want people to know is Go get a new spouse. Go get a new job. Get a new house. Buy a new car, and then a newer car, and then get different clothes, and then get whatever makeup thing, and get whatever it is you think you want and you need that's going to fulfill you, but never forget that you go with you. And so you get that new job, great. Day 3, you're going to look in the mirror, and your kid's going to come in and ask you that, Mom, I forgot my thing, or Dad, I need this. And you are right back to you and whatever the new world is that you thought was going to solve you. And so yeah, dude, leave your wife, blow up your entire world. Most people think they picture their life exactly as it is, just in a new circumstance. And I always want people to know, no. If you leave your wife, everything implodes, right? Everything changes. Your home, your job, the way your friends interact with you. You now have to say, oh, I used to be married, right? Like everything changes. And sometimes if you're in an abusive situation or somebody's cheating on you all the time, of course there's reasons, but I always want you to know that you go with you. And most people don't think that through. They just get mad at somebody or don't like somebody, or they create revisionist history and try to drag the past into right now.
What I thought was so interesting that you did with that one caller, and I think you do this with a lot of the callers that call into your show, is you really got him, and sometimes it's a her, women actually divorce more than men do, right? But you got him in this conversation to really verbalize. You really pushed him to verbalize, what is it that you're really wanting exactly? What is it that's really underneath the feelings? What are the thoughts that you have about your wife that you don't like, or the thoughts about your life that you don't like? Can you share more about this difference between our feelings and our thoughts, and how our thoughts impact our feelings?
Well, our feelings don't tell us the truth. That's not their job. If you ask any neuroscientist, feelings aren't designed to lay out the facts of a situation. They're designed to keep you safe and not dead. And they also don't have the same timeline continuity that reality does. Meaning, if my dad was unsafe, let's say my dad was an awesome, amazing man, but let's say my dad beat me up all the time. And every time my dad drove up the driveway as a little boy, I knew I needed to hide. And then I get married 25 years later. My body put a GPS pin in that. When dad comes home, you get out of the way. Well, then my wife drives up the driveway. And my body quietly sounds an alarm that says it's time to get small and go ahead and let's go into the other room, right? I feel like I need to go, but I don't. And so my feelings, we have, as a culture, we have like, how do you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel? I don't care. If you sit down and have hard conversations with someone that you love and that you care about, and you'll work through hard things, and you both say, here's what I need, and I'll help you meet your needs. I need you to help me meet my needs, and my whole life is about serving you, and your whole life is about serving me. And together we're going to create this new amazing thing together that, by the way, we're going to have to create over and over and over again for our whole marriage, because our life's going to change all the time. You do that, happiness is a byproduct of that work. It's not a thing that you try to chase down, because it's fireworks and cotton candy. It dissolves, it goes away. It's a vapor. You can't grab it. And so I think we have it backwards. We're trying to reverse engineer happy instead of doing a bunch of really hard, important, powerful things. And happiness is a cool thing at the end of the rainbow.
But feelings do matter, right? In terms of their
100%
signal
yes.
of what's something else
Yes.
going on. But like you said, they're not laying out the facts of a situation. So, what's your advice for people that are we're at the start of the new year, it's 2024. And I think that it's very important for people to be in touch with their deepest desires, or discern, what am I really seeking or wanting deep in my heart? And feelings are a part of that. They're not the whole story, of course. What's your take on even understanding one's restlessness, you could say, discontentedness, and the feelings associated with that, to come to a realization of, this is the right, moral, good path for my life?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And by the way, I get lots of grief from my friends, both science nerds and in my new media world, because I'm too feeling centric. I believe deeply in listening to feelings, as they are important indicators. So yeah, I tend to, I hit the pendulum too far towards feelings. So I'm glad you called it back. Here's what I often ask people to do. I tell people that you got to choose reality. And I think that's a smart place to start. So pull out a piece of paper and write down and spend some time thinking about it. What is the true state of my marriage? What's the true, what is my relationship with my kids? How much money do I owe somebody? Like, whether it's the mortgage or the cars, or what is the state of my life? And as you write those things out, you'll feel nervous, you'll feel excited, you'll feel angry, you'll feel frustrated. And that is a good place to put, stars by. That's your body saying, hey, we need to press on this. The challenge with feelings is this. So if you take anxiety, which is something I accidentally backed my way into. I didn't mean to talk about this as a career, but it just kind of happened that way. The neurophysiology of anxiety is, if you feel anxious and you avoid the thing you felt anxious about, it actually reinforces the anxious feeling. It makes it stronger because your body got what it wanted, which is to keep you safe. The only problem is it doesn't keep your relationship whole. It doesn't keep you in your job. It doesn't keep you connected with your kids or your friends. It keeps you increasingly more and more isolated and alone and away. And so when you feel anxious, head directly into that. And if you're like me and that's scary or that's hard or you don't even know how to do that, get a friend, get a counselor, get a pastor, get somebody to go with you, but head towards those hard, scary feelings. If you're married, sit down and have the courage to say across the table, if it's safe, I feel as distant from you as I ever have. I feel like I can't breathe when you come in the room, and I don't know why I'm scared of my own wife. And have those hard conversations, because your body's trying to solve for that all the time.
EveryLife.com is America's pro-life diaper company. These are high-performing diapers and wipes for your little one. I think you're going to love the product. They are great diapers. We've ordered a lot of diapers at our house, and EveryLife does not disappoint. What's so wonderful about EveryLife.com is you're not only getting a great diaper and wipes, and they have other products that are coming, so check it out, but that EveryLife.com is a pro-life diaper company. They support your values, and they donate some of their proceeds back to the pro-life movement, including groups like your favorite, Live Action. So check out everylife.com today. You can use the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. Order that bundle of wipes and diapers for that new little niece or nephew in your life, your new son or daughter, your friend's baby. It's a great gift. They also have these cute new mom baby boxes. Check it out at everylife.com and use the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. How does one have a hard conversation with like that if that's really the, ugly truth going on deep down in someone's heart or body even? It's a feeling that they're having, when that can do so much painful damage to the person sitting on the other side of the table.
I think, there's two challenges there. One is the assumption is you're not doing painful damage by saying nothing. And I would suggest that you are slowly suffocating each other if you say nothing versus just putting it on the table right now. That's number one. Number two is most people let these things get pent up, these feelings, and then they explode all over somebody. So I always tell like a spouse or a romantic partner of any sort, when they're sitting across the table, speak about you. I am experiencing absolute loneliness in this relationship. That's different than you haven't been doing this and you haven't been doing that, because when you go at somebody, they instantly have to defend themselves. It'd be silly not to. And now you're in a war versus I can't breathe in this house. I feel scared when you walk into a room. Why? I'm not doing anything. I'm not saying about you. I'm saying I need to figure out what's going on, because you say that you love me, and every time I walk in a room, you flip your phone over. I feel like this. And that's different than, let me see your phone. Right? So it's sitting down and saying, here's what I'm experiencing in this house. Here's what I'm experiencing in this relationship. And that's a gentler invitation to a conversation than attacking somebody. And for me and my wife, to be honest with you, we had to get to a place where we sat down like grown-ups across the table and said, are we going to stay married? It was a very grown up. We have we have an older kid and a younger kid. Are we going to keep doing this? Because we can't keep being married like we are. So as adults, are we going to call it? Or are we going to go forward? If we're going to go forward, we have to start being open on a regular basis. And that was the key to creating a marriage that I didn't know was possible. I didn't know it could be this great. But it started with, I promise to never attack you, but I also promise to always tell you the truth. And that's changed everything.
Well, I think the key element there is a trust that even if it's really rough what you're saying, and the other person may feel offended by it. Like, you're just too touchy, or I didn't intend to make you feel that way, but you're still feeling that way. I mean, it can quickly devolve, right? But I think there's this, the secret ingredient is trust, that you're going to stick it out and be there, and that you both have good intentions and want good things for the other person and want to stay together. How does someone, if there's someone listening right now, I started with this example of this, guy saying he always regretted his marriage, and it called into your show, and they're like, well, I don't have that trust with my spouse or with my significant other, and I feel so alone. I don't know what to do. What should they do?
I think you make a beeline. You stop everything in your life and you go see a professional therapist as soon as possible, period. Here's why. There is no relationship without trust. I don't care what marriage certificate you're holding. I don't care how many kids you have. I don't care how many mortgages y'all have signed together. You don't have a marriage if you don't trust each other, period. And I hear that all over the country. Yeah, but I've got my thing over here, and he or she has their thing over there. And that makes you great business partners. That makes you co-managers of the household, like Jim and Michael Scott in a couple of episodes, right? I mean, you're just co-managers. You are not married. And most of us have tried to be in a trusting relationship, and we've gotten burned bad. And our bodies tell us, don't ever do that again. Or we watched our parents go all in, and one of them got burned real bad. And so it makes sense to be weary of that. The other side of it is, I'm promising you, you cannot have a fully engaged, vulnerable, connected, amazing marriage, and therefore an amazing family legacy, a change of your family tree, unless you go all in, both feet in the boat. You can't have one on land and one in the water. And that's scary and terrifying, yet that's the only way it works.
But it takes ultimately the two to go all in, but someone needs to start the all-in process, because I think that's what happens. It's like one person is afraid to go all in, maybe even in the marriage, because maybe they don't feel that the other person is all in. And again, this isn't everyone's story, but in some of these really rough situations. So what do you do when you're not sure? Maybe in this situation, you're concerned. You had another video about cheating. I think my spouse is cheating on me, right? So you're concerned your spouse is definitely not all in, right? So how do you still stand up and say, I'm going to be true to the vows that I made at the altar and be all in?
I think you have to sit down at a table and say, I'm going all in here. And you have to be willing to risk what comes on the other side. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds very bravado. There is a terrifying economic consequence to women who leave their husbands, especially outside of a top earning potential, right? The data tells me that when women leave, their net worth goes down, especially when they have kids. And men's actually goes up a little bit. So it's not as easy. It's really cool to be like, you should just leave. Well, that's like, who's going to pay the bills, right? I got to eat. That gets scary and hard. And so I think it's important for everyone to know there is no easy path here. And we're going back to the feelings conversation. Most of us want to avoid feeling quote unquote bad. And so if I have this conversation, what if he actually leaves? And I think the question that's even scarier is, what if he actually stays? And this is your life for the next 30 years. What if we just had a hard conversation, or 2 or 3 or 4, or we primed it and said, hey, I want to build a new marriage because the one we've built up till now is not going to serve us moving forward. Are you in? And when I say all in, here's what I'm going to need. Or we don't even know how to do this. Let's get a marriage counselor, somebody who's trained in this to help be a neutral third party and walk with us. All those things are helpful, but I think it takes somebody recognizing, I got to choose the hard path here. And it's either going to be hard being in a marriage where both of us have one foot out of the boat and we're kind of playing and kind of like, or it's going to be real hard and I'm going to put all my chips on the table, and I hope you do too.
I think part of the challenge for a lot of people is that they see either these like picture perfect images of relationships from, the fiction books they're reading, if we're talking old school, or just from your social media feed, if you're talking like the social media world. And so you see this beautiful, idyllic, idealized version, romanticized version of relationships. And then there's the real world, and there's divorce, and there's your parents split up, and there's the rough stuff that you saw that you don't want to be a part of, right? It's the wounds from childhood. Absolutely. You're like, I don't want that. But then there's the third way, which is reality, which is like, the real world for the vast majority of people, which is not the idealized romantic. And it's not the just let's crash and burn over here, but it's let's put in that work. how do people learn how to do the work, or what kind of work is acceptable to even do without it bordering, oh, this is actually me being okay with emotional or physical abuse?
I mean, I think taking abuse off the table for a second. We can circle back to that. I think it starts with two people sitting across the table from one another saying, I don't have a picture of what a great marriage looks like. My parents didn't have that. Your parents didn't have that. Are you interested in building something new? I thought when I still launched the John Delony Show, I thought that people were coming to the show because it took off so fast because I was so smart. They weren't. They came to the show really fast because of how I talked to other people. That's what they had never seen. They'd never seen somebody sit down across the table from someone who said, hey, I just cheated on my husband. I don't know what to do next. And me not yell and kick and scream and me say, dude, pass the nachos. We got to figure this out. And still say you can't cheat if you want to stay married, right? And here's how to, so I think it's finding pictures of what this looks like. That could be sitting with an older married couple who's figured it out. That can be going to counseling. That can be reading books together and having honest conversations. I had been pretty open about the one conversation my wife and I had, and we sat across the table. It's like, are we going to keep doing this? I had her as a guest on my show for my 500th episode. I had her as a guest, and she said something like, one time, we've done that like 4 times. And I was like, well, I guess that's out there now, right? So there is no perfect marriage. It doesn't exist. I think what makes it perfect is, will you both keep coming back to the table and saying, okay, cool. The great Esther Perel said, I love what she said. She said, most adults have 4 or 5 great lives in their adulthood. And if you work really hard, it can be with the same person. And so this idea of, I am married to a radically different person right now than I married 21 years ago. Her name is the same. Her social security number is the same, but she is a radically different person. And thank God I'm a radically different guy, because I was an idiot back then. I'm still not that great, but I'm better than I was. The goal is, can we keep coming back to the table and saying, hey, we've never been parents with an 8th grader and a 2nd grader. How can I love you this week? And I wish it was more complex than that, but in my home, after 2 decades, we ask that question every week. What's your picture of this week look like, and how can I best love you this week? And when I feel things get intense, I'll say, how can I love you today? And sometimes her answer hurts my feelings. I need you to go outside, out into the woods, and not be here for a little bit. And I'll go, great, I'm out, right? And sometimes it's, I need you to do bedtimes tonight because I'm going to set the house on fire just to feel it warmth, right? And so it's always coming back and coming back and coming back. And the expectation is she's going to say, hey, how can I love you today? And when 2 people are engaged that way, you're never going to do it perfectly. But if you're committed to always coming back, man, you build something more incredible than you ever could have imagined.
7 Weeks Coffee is delicious gourmet coffee that can be shipped directly to your home. If you go to 7weekscoffee.com, you'll learn the story of not only an amazing company that supports your pro-life values, but a company that creates and crafts some of the best and most gourmet coffee blends. I love drinking 7 Weeks Coffee because I'm not only getting an amazing cup of coffee, but I am supporting the pro-life movement every time I take a sip of 7 Weeks. Why is that? That's because, as you guys may have heard already on the show, I've talked about it before, 7 Weeks Coffee gives 10% of their revenue, not just their profits, 10% of all revenue directly to pregnancy resource centers. So when you drink that great cup of coffee, you are directly supporting the care for mothers and babies in need. 7 Weeks Coffee is called 7 Weeks because that is when the baby at 7 weeks preborn is the size of, yes, a coffee bean. Check out 7 Weeks Coffee today. You can use the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. If you haven't already tried it, what are you waiting for? That's 7weekscoffee.com. Use the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. There is this common phrase, marry the wrong person, this idea that you can marry the wrong person. And I've seen it, in like Reddit threads or, support groups online that are people pouring out their hearts, or just in personal friendships over the years where people are worried that they will marry the wrong person. So it kind of paralyzes them in decision making. Or once they're married, if they're hitting a rough patch, they're concerned, did I marry the wrong person? Do you buy that it's possible to marry the wrong person?
I don't buy that there's such thing as a right or wrong, right? That goes back to the Romeo, oh Romeo, right? Where our vision, our pinnacle vision of romance in the 21st century is 2 teenagers who snuck away to get married so they could sleep together and then died in a murder-suicide. That is our ultimate picture of romance in our culture. It's insane. It's madness. So no, I don't buy into there's one right person or there's a wrong person. No doubt about it. There are people that say, I don't care what your values are. This is what I'm doing. We're going to live in this house and I'm going to drive this Suburban. I don't care if we can afford it or not. And I will take out this much debt and I will buy this and our kids will be dressed like that. I mean, yeah, there's definitely people who are not interested in building a marriage. They are interested in reflecting to the world their fantasy about what success looks like. So yeah, if you're married to somebody who has no interest in being married to you, they're not right. That's not right. I don't know that they're wrong existentially. They have just chosen, I don't want to work on this with you. I don't want to be in a relationship with you. I think it's important to note that every single solitary relationship in the world, from a friendship to a relationship with a pet to a relationship with a employer to a romantic relationship, every one of those is a risk that something's going to happen on the other end, that they're going to look at you and say, I don't want to be in this anymore with you. You can't work here anymore. I'm running away, as my dog did one time. Every relationship you enter is a risk. And so if you're not ready to take that risk, then don't get involved. But don't peg it to some existential, I don't want to marry the wrong one. What's the right one? The right one is two people who sit at a table and say, I'm all in if you're all in. That's the right one. And you can have a right one with a whole bunch of different people. You just got to, everyone's got to make that choice.
Yeah, it's the power of the promise. I think one piece of advice that was given to me years ago that I found so helpful is that morality, the moral code, like, be faithful. Marriage is forever. Like when you get married and you make those vows, you keep your promise. That clarifies a whole lot of complications that sometimes we create or we can invent, where if what you're doing is not moral, then that thing is not going to ultimately bring happiness in the long run, and that thing is not the right decision, period. And then it's sort of the question of prudence. Okay, well, how do I navigate this difficult situation I may be in? But, and if you are married to them, they are the right person. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about making the choice. If you really went in that marriage freely and you really chose that freely, obviously if you were coerced or abused or into it, that's different. But then that is the right person. And then it's a question of how do we make this work together?
Yeah, I think you can tie yourself in knots. Is this the right? Is that the right? I think that's not the question. The question is, who are you going to be when you take this job? Who are you going to be when you enter into this relationship? Who are you going to be when you have this child? And we try to hedge everything on the front end of it. I just don't think that's how it works. Similar to my grandparents were married, I want to say 73 years, maybe 74 before my granddad died. They were married for a billion years.
Awesome.
My granddad was a World War II vet. They were amazing. They raised 4 awesome kids. They did all this cool stuff. And then when my granddad died, I remember my grandmother looking at me. She was a powerhouse of a woman. And she couldn't breathe right. And she said, I don't know what to do. And that's when I realized, they're a single entity. She lost one of her lungs, and she lost one of her legs, and one of her arms, and a half of her heart. And that's what a soulmate was. And when they got married, the idea of a soulmate, what a dumb idea. That's dumb. Like we just did life together for 70 years. And what we try to do now is we try to reverse engineer that. We try to marry a soulmate, find the person, and then create it that way. That's not how it works. You have to go put in the hard work for 25, 50, 70 years. And then at the end, you realize, we share everything. We share the air, right? And that's a different proposition. It's a cultural flip-flop that we've done that doesn't make any sense and it doesn't bear out.
So good. That's so good. One of the comments I saw on the video about the guy, going back to that same one about him, having these regrets and these emotions that he was dealing with, and then he cheats on his wife, but he's still in the marriage, and you were telling him, make up your mind, be all in or all out. And either way, your misery will follow you. But one of the top comments on the video, which I thought was so telling, it was, I left my marriage of 11 years. I took my son from my first marriage with me, but my daughter from my second marriage chose to stay with my husband. I cheated on him because I thought the grass was greener on the other side. It wasn't. I threw away my family and it has come to haunt me even a generation later. My daughter chose not to have a relationship with me. And then she talks about all the fallout from the grass was greener. She went on after this fling. She, had this vision of a different life. And now she's on Christmas and she says, today is Christmas and I have to watch them on TikTok or on Instagram because it's the only way I can feel like they're in my life at all. And she says, don't ruin your lives with infidelity. If you're married and you have children, try to work through it. It destroys their life and it will destroy yours as well. I mean, I feel like that story isn't told enough, that raw honesty, because the happy divorce story seems to be told more often in pop culture. I mean, think about all the celebrities who happily divorced. We've chosen to, amicably, we love each other till eternity, but now we're going our separate ways, right? And it's like all happy pictures of their separate ways, not reality.
Well, and it comes down to this, the phrase we hear a lot is our relationship has run its course. And I just call nonsense on that. One of you or both of you quit. Call it what it is. Call it what it is. And you can still be my friend. You can still come to my house and drink my beers. I mean, you still be my friend. But you quit. You quit. Both of you did. Or one of you wanted to be with somebody else and you thought that was going to make things okay. Or one of you got real obsessed with X or Y or let go of X or Y. Whatever the thing is. One of you got abusive and unbearable. Y'all stopped. And so I just don't buy that language as though some relationships have more gas than others. It's just people quit driving, and it is what it is, right? But you're right. The other side, I think factually, I don't know the data on it. It'd be interesting to look at it. I don't know how you could do a real study on this, but for every one of those, I get another note that says, hey, I left my marriage and I got remarried and it's great and wonderful and good. Okay, well, fine. But you're right. The conversation about, no, I went ahead and this person made me feel more alive. I texted this person back that I wasn't married to, and then she thought I was hilarious, and then I texted him back, and then I sent this picture, and he sent that picture, and then we ended up meeting up, and I thought it was going to solve this feeling, and I ended up blowing up everything. Yeah, that story's just not told. It's just not told enough. And so I again, like, if you're getting your relationship advice from celebrity Instagrams, that's probably not a great place to get it. Get it from your elderly neighbors who live down the street, who are still married. Go sit with them and figure it out. They're going to give you, they may not give you some nonsense from some modern day college professor. They may not give you some nonsense that sounds all hip and cool on Instagram, but they're going to tell you the truth because they made it. They pulled it out.
Well, I think that what you just said, you get messages, and I know couples that are remarried after divorces. And sometimes, in the Catholic tradition, there's something called annulment, saying that this actually wasn't a marriage to begin with. So that's a different category. Yeah, it wasn't an actual marriage because there wasn't freedom or there was a secret cover up from one of the spouses, et cetera. But let's just talk about divorce where, no, it was, we fell apart or, whatever it was. And, those happily remarried stories, it's still not, there's not an acknowledgement there that there maybe could have been a happily, restoring story or a happy rejuvenation story or something with your first spouse if all the work that we're talking about had been done, but you'll never know because you never did it, right? You walked into the new relationship. So again, not to pass judgment on anyone specifically here, but I think that's another just kind of story that's not told is like that story of, no, we're going to fight it out together and make it work and create something even more beautiful together instead of just trying it somewhere else.
Yeah, Esther Perel's analogy was one of the most profound I've ever heard. She was talking to a couple who had experienced infidelity. One of them had cheated on the other one. And they kept using language, I just wanted to get back. I just want to get back. I want to get back to the way it was when we were dating. I want to get back to those first few years when we didn't have any kids and we were just having sex all the time, all over the place, and everything was wild and fun and so exciting. We had money to burn. And what she said was, really, I love this picture. She said, you could not go back to Manhattan, downtown New York, on September 12th, 2001, and sweep up all the glass and twisted steel and wood and use all that dust and rebuild those two twin towers. They fell. You had two choices. You walk away and let nature take it back over the next couple million years, or you get a bunch of experts and professionals in there. You'll excavate the whole thing. You have to design and build something brand new that is hopefully stronger, arguably more beautiful. That's a testament to it's a picture of the past, but also a projection into the future. And you got to build something completely new. And I think if more couples entered into marriage knowing our first year is going to be what it is, and then we're going to have to rebuild something new. You know why? Because we've never been married for a second year with all the temptations and struggles and financial realities, and I want to move and parent influence and all that kind of stuff. And then when you have your first kid, I can't tell you how many times I hear, I just wanted to get back. I want my wife to get back to the way things were. I want my husband to be back. Dude, it's not ever going to be that way. You have a kid now. It's different. And so you have to build a new marriage around this. And if you wrap your head around that, it can be the funnest thing in the world. I love it. We do an annual, my wife and I get away for an annual retreat every year just to say, how was last year? And we had some like personal goals, and we have some ideas about how things might look in the future. And what do we wish? What do we have to grieve from last year? What are we excited about? What do we need to stop and just celebrate from last year? In this year's meeting, by the way, it was awful. We had to come back for another meeting and a third meeting because the first couple were bad. They didn't go well. We got pretty cross with each other. We ended up in a pretty weird disagreement. So they're not all rose petals and scented candles. It's tough. But this idea is we got to build something new all the time. My wife married a nerd. She's never been married to somebody who gets bajillions of comments all the time and people sending stuff to our house and showing up in the, when we're out in restaurants. Like, that's a new marriage for her. And I've never been married to so all of it's new. And there's a beauty and a fun to that. But when you experience things, when things go sideways, you can't get back to the way it was. You can't go backwards. You've got to build something new from the floor up. And that's a big things and minor things, little things.
Takes a lot of action, resiliency. You can use that word, but it's really just plowing through, like taking action, like making forward movement. And it makes sense because love is not a feeling, right? Love is an action. It's a choice that you make
action.
Day in and day out. And that sometimes can be really hard. And love is not always butterflies and easy. Sometimes it is that hard choice every day, and you got to plow through. But that's where you're building something really beautiful. And that what you're building is you're building a relationship of real love, of actual a foundation on sacrifice, as opposed to just this is for me and my feelings.
And that would be the worst Ryan Gosling movie ever. If it was
There's a lot of already worse Ryan Gosling movies ever.
Well, but if he, I don't know, I kind of love him.
You
but
like him, okay. Are you a chick flick person? It sounds like it.
No, I just saw him without a shirt on, and I was like, man, that'd be nice. But here's the deal. So if the movie was he opens his eyes and he looks over at his sleeping wife and says, I choose to love you today. And he gets up and makes his side of the bed, and then he gets up and picks up the wet towels that she left on the floor. And he gets up and starts making breakfast. And if that would be a boring movie. It would, but that's what love looks like over the long haul, right? And also, it looks like her waking up when he's asleep and doing the same thing on the other side of it. So it's both people deciding, I'm going to be all in on this thing. But it doesn't make for a sexy, exciting movie. The same as, it took me and my wife almost 15 years to pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in mortgages and student loans and nonsense. And it was the worst. And yet we found parts of ourselves on the other side of that, a strength that we didn't know, a marriage we didn't know, a freedom we didn't know existed. And I could have sat there and tweeted a lot about it and yelled about it and been mad at the government about it. Or here's the choice in front of you right now. Let's just go make those hard choices. And over the long haul, we're going to create something pretty extraordinary.
I get my actors mixed up a lot. Ryan Gosling was in The Notebook, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. That's what I mean. That movie, because it's just she threw away love. I mean, they weren't married yet, right? They were just fiancés. So I guess all's fair in love and war to some extent because they hadn't actually made the commitment yet. But I just felt like the emotional childishness of that movie.
Well, I'll tell you something that will make me a terrible relationship.
Notebook? How would you critique The Notebook? Have you seen The Notebook?
Here's how I'm gonna critique it as a huge fail.
I'm gonna get some hate in the comments. Some people are gonna love that movie, but
as a relationship guy, I hate to say that I've never seen it. So I'm gonna make it a my my publicist just was like, "What?" Like, no, I've never seen it, so I will watch it.
It's pretty horrible, in my opinion. Maybe I'll do a video on this one day of like my least favorite chick flicks and why. But it was just like the childishness of what love is. Like love is purely emotion and desire, as opposed to love is a decision, and it's a decision that you spend time investing your life in over a period of time, as opposed to just like a fling, basically. But anyways,
right.
maybe next time we can talk about that one.
I actually had breakfast recently with I won't out this person, but it's an expert that would be recognizable to some of your listeners. And the conversation we were having was a very personal, private conversation. But he said, if you had told my 21-year-old self that sex in my 40s would have been so much better than it was in my 20s, with one person I've been married to for this long, I would have said, you're insane. You're insane. And I said, what do you think that is? And he said, it's an honesty and a vulnerability, because you're still hedging your bets when you're in your 20s. You're still trying to hide. You're still trying to present the Instagram filtered version of you, even when you're married, even with that person that walks in on you while you're going to the bathroom. And there's something about being 40 and going, this is who I am. And I love all of you. Will you please love all of me? Which I think is the scariest question anybody can ask. But I think it was a profound, and I laughed because I was like, dude, you can't tell any 19-year-old that. And they're like, he's like, I know, dude. You can't tell anybody that. You just have to experience it. But it's this idea that just hang in there. Just hang in there. I don't feel like I love you anymore. Let that be the starting line, not the finish line. Let that be the starting line to at least trying to have some challenging conversations that will lead to a brand new marriage, that you're married to a different person and you're a different person and y'all have created something powerful for yourselves, for your kids, for your community. Let that attempt to be a starting line, not a finish line. Because that idea of I feel, man, that can be really tough. It should be a signal, not a statement.
Well, and I think as Christians, there is the intangible becomes very tangible of God's grace. Like there's three in a marriage. It's not just you and that person sticking it out. And yeah, this is not to say like people who don't believe in God can't marry and stay married and be faithful and develop love together. They absolutely can. But when you're asking God for that special supernatural support, that grace, it does make this huge difference. It can be transformative. But again, I think even those examples or stories aren't told enough either. And so sometimes people don't trust that can be real for them.
Or even that idea of, you mentioned it earlier, I think it's important to just click on, like, covenant. I said I would. I said forever. And I said if you get sick, or if we go broke, or if you do something that other people think is unforgivable, like I said forever. I said that. And so I think we throw that away. I think we have just a very distracting, disposable culture. I said forever. I know when I buy a car, maybe I got 10 years of that thing. Or if you're like me, you keep cars way too long and you embarrass your family. But like when you buy something, you're going to replace it at some point. We just have a pretty disposable culture. And I think there's something, like I said I would. And if you're a person of faith, and you bring your deity into it, you tell God, I'm in forever. That's an important covenant that you made, right? It's the important covenant you made. You stamped it into concrete, and just to blow it off is it's pretty dismissive and small. It's a frightening thing just to blow that off.
There's another topic that came up a lot in some of the lives that I saw that you did, the live question and answers. And this one is a topic that I think deserves so much exploration, because I think it really affects, we've touched on it in this conversation. It's basically feelings and a desire, but I think it affects decision-making around relationships more than maybe anything else. And it has to do with attraction, the feeling of attraction, this sort of intangible of like, I have this vision of being with this person or in another scenario, and it's just keeping me up at night. And so you're unhappy. You're not in the present moment with your spouse or your current relationship. Anyways, you did a video with this guy, this kid called in, he was 22 years old, newlywed. I think if I remember it correctly, the title was, I have a crush on a coworker, but I'm happily married. Apparently this young man switches jobs. He moves to a new town. He's been married, but now he's have this random attraction sudden and strong attraction to a coworker, and he's like, what do I do? Does this mean I, again, married the wrong person? How do I navigate this? Share your thoughts, like how to navigate attraction. Because the reality is, and I heard this before I got married from marriage counselors, you should be attracted to your spouse when you marry them. By the way, do not marry someone if you're not attracted to them. Do you agree with that, by the way, John?
Yeah, I think it's helpful.
Okay. Yeah. Just a little bit.
I think attraction is drastically reductionistic. Like it's very aesthetic, right?
Yes, of course.
And I think attraction means something so much more than like
physical,
do they have the right body features?
Totally,
right? Exactly.
Totally. It's
but yes, you need to be attracted to the person you're with. 100%.
Yes. So, and then what that means to different people at different times, that it does ebb and flow. It changes. Yeah. But the point here is, what is your take on how to handle attraction, especially when you're married, and if you experience a lack of attraction suddenly, less attraction than you thought, attraction for other people? Because in the modern world today, I think in pop culture and secular society, if you're not attracted, you should get out. And if you are really attracted to someone else, you should get in bed with them, basically, if they want to get in bed with you. Right. And, this is a long question here, but I was recently on a podcast with this gentleman who's a big YouTuber named Destiny, and that's his like stage name on YouTube. Anyways, and he was in this open marriage with his wife. He called her his wife. She called him her husband. But they basically said, if we have sexual attraction for somebody else and they're down, we're okay with sharing. And, unsurprisingly, the marriage unraveled very publicly. Now they're divorced or they're divorcing. It's very tragic. But why? What does one do with attraction in and outside of marriage? What are some of the bright lines and how to navigate that?
Well, I think there's multiple questions inside that question, so we can just kind of pull them apart. As you mentioned, attraction ebbs and flows. When I was in the middle of writing a book and I was getting up at 4 a.m. and then going to work all day for shows and then traveling and then writing in hotel rooms, I would come home a haggard mess. I was not, the joke with my wife is like, I know I'm not my A game right now. I was in the gym, I was mainlining gummy candies all the time. I didn't look great. I was a haggard mess. And so that ebbs and flows. That's part of life. That's part of being in a relationship with somebody. The same as people get grumpy and they're in great moods and there's a really tough season at work. And so there's that natural ebb and flow to that. And if you allow yourself to be just blown either which way in the wind, like a small little sailboat, you're gonna wreck your marriage. I also think it's absolutely insane to be. If I remember correctly, I don't remember the end of this call, but I remember walking away thinking, this guy's beating himself up because he was working at a new place and this coworker is pretty and she's hilarious and he has a crush on her. Like, I don't think you beat yourself up over that, but it's an important signal that I need to not go to lunch with this person. I need to not respond. I need to not text this person. I need to make sure that my boundaries are really firm because I like their company. And this is a recipe for blowing my whole life up. And so for me, dude, I travel I meet amazing people. Of course you find yourself attracted to people. You think people are wonderful and hilarious and so smart and so fun. I want to have another conversation. And I told my wife I do. And so I've made the mistake before of seeing how close you can get to that line and dancing on it. And whoa, man, you can get scary close. And so now those signals, those alarms for me are, like, you don't even go near that stuff. But I think it's nuts to say you're never going to be attracted to somebody ever again. That doesn't mean you go act on it. You know who does that? Children. You've seen the marshmallow test, right? Like
some kids are really strong with those tests, though. It's remarkable.
They are. But children have feelings, and then they act on each one of them. Adults are able to create a plan and stick with it, create covenant and stick with it. Now, when it comes to what I would call more drastic things, like people have called my show and says my husband or wife has gained 100 pounds. Or they went and cut all their hair off, or my husband shaved his head and did this and whatever, and now I'm not attracted to them anymore. I think that is a conversation that you sit down and have. Honestly, here's why. They know. Nobody gains 100 pounds or 50 pounds and doesn't know. But they know when you avert your eyes. They know when your touch slowly fades and stops. They know when intimacy in your marriage starts to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. They know. And so pretending like you don't want to quote unquote hurt anybody's feelings, or pretending like you don't want, you're just slowly suffocating each other. Have the conversation. And when it comes to like, the one I get on my show a lot is, hey, my partner's gained a lot of weight. That's often, almost always a conversation about, I'm worried about you. Because that's often a byproduct of a bunch of other things going on in our marriage. Or I'm watching the person I love slowly become less and less of who they were, both in personality and in joy and in all these other things. And so it's almost, well, not almost never, it's less a conversation about, he used to have abs and now he doesn't. It's not about that. It's about, dude, I'm worried about my husband, right? I'm really worried about him on a host, and I'm not attracted to him anymore. And so I think you sit down and you have that hard conversation. And again, it's not, hey, listen, you've gained a bunch of weight. That's not how you have that conversation, because now you've started a fight and they have to go to war with you. They got to defend themselves. But it is, I'm really worried about you, and I'm struggling with being attracted to you. And I'm going to own that. And you're putting your vulnerability on the table. Is that going to hurt to hear that? Absolutely. Is that going to be the path towards healing? Yes. If there's going to be healing to be had, then yes.
I think it's hard. I hear a lot of these stories, especially from kind of like postpartum mom groups. But, women who are in the childbearing years and they're gaining weight and the weight stays on, and then they feel they're not as attractive, or their husband even has the candid conversation with them, I'm not as attracted. I mean, what do you do in that kind of a more sticky situation where it's not as clean cut as, oh, just let me get you on a diet plan to lose 50 pounds?
I don't know that there's a clean cut metric there. I'll tell any guy, like if you're challenging your pregnant wife on how she looks,
postpartum. So she's,
dude.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but keep in mind, like the world. I mean, another thing we talk about in the podcast a lot is pornography, and I go on shows and I debate people about why porn is not a good thing, which surprisingly some people still think porn can somehow be a good thing, but unfortunately, that's our culture today. But a lot of people are waking up and saying, no, it's a bad thing. And so anyways, there's this expectation of what I want sexually or what I'm seeking. And obviously when you're, if you're in a marriage and your spouse is having children and then everything else is a natural part of marriage, it doesn't match what the pornification culture sets up as, the ideal womanhood or whatever it is. So I don't know if you have any advice, generally speaking, for the right mindset to have for men and women.
Well, I think you nailed it first. I don't know a neuroscientist that thinks pornography is a good idea anymore. I don't know who's still hanging on to that, but and that's not even like a faith-based statement. That's a science argument. I think you have to deal with the fact that your husband has a fantasy that they've created about how the world works. It is simply untrue. And they have been willing to throw away all of this other thing. We talked about attraction is a big picture, right? It's not just aesthetic. But they're willing to erase all of that for X and Y and Z. Man. That's a conversation that your marriage you have to deal with in your marriage. And by the way, try to say this the right way.
Would that be an addiction? It sounds like if they're
addicted to pornography, yes.
Or addicted to a sexual idea. You could say like stuck on an idea about how sex should be, or what they need their spouse's body to be.
I don't know if I'd classify it as an addiction. It's just not real. It's imaginary. It's not real. It's it's not real. And if that's what you think you need, then you're gonna have a very, very miserable life. A very miserable life, and because you're gonna move from person to person to person to person. And you are not going to know the depths of you're not going to know it's 70 years. And when your partner dies, that part of you goes with them because that's how connected you are. But yeah, it's I don't know, I wouldn't classify it as an addiction, but I classify it as just an irrational fantasy. It's not real. It's not real. And so it's a both and. It's a both and. But here's the thing. Here's what I was trying to. I didn't know the right way to say this, or a tangible. I mean, a couth way of saying this. But if that's the person that you married, my guess is I would be surprised. Maybe not, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't seeds of that before you started having kids. Before these other things happen. It would surprise me if that wasn't already a piece of their character, and that you already felt embarrassed or small or not enough. And I want people, as we went back to the very beginning of this conversation, those feelings that if you feel like you have to cover up in front of your husband, if you feel like you have to turn away a little bit in front of your husband, listen to that signal and at least put that on the table, because that will come back. The ROI on that will be really tough to deal with when life happens, right? And maybe somebody just flips a switch, but man. And by the way, it's easy to throw all the men under the bus. I tell you, I've had countless more conversations behind closed doors with men who, after their wives had kids, were like, I thought I was in love. And now, dude, I'll go to hell and back for that woman. Like, that's the most amazing. Like, it transforms, and that story is not told enough either.
I agree. That's such a good point.
Bro,
yeah.
It maybe it's just me, and I'm pretty outspoken, and my buddies know me, and I keep a pretty small group of pals. But I can't think of a guy who has called me as a buddy. He's like, dude, my wife had a baby, and it's like a few months later, and she's like, I haven't got that call. I have got the calls like, dude, were you in the room when your wife had a baby? Like, yeah. And he's like, the men are like, dude, I cannot believe how in love I am. And if you ever say anything like that out loud, then I'm going to lie. I'm going to tell them that you lied. But that's the story I hear more. And again, I may have a very small circle, but it is what it is.
No, I personally, I hear that story more too. And I think it's unfortunately, there's these really sad, awful stories that make their rounds on the internet. And then there are people that are going through that. And so they're connecting with that and they're saying, this is my story too. So I think it's just easier for a sad, awful story to go viral than a good, positive one. I mean, that's kind of the nature of news and
let me ask you this. How many women do you talk to? And this is more just inquisitive. I'm not leading here. They have a particular picture in their mind about what their husbands want, and they don't feel like they're living up to that picture, and so that the hedge in the relationship begins there.
That's a great question. I think,
and it may be chicken or egg.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lot of cases. That's a lot of cases where it's more the insecurity that she may be bringing into the relationship. And he's like, it's good. I'm great. That's not coming from him. It's more coming from her. And again, that goes back to, just body image issues in general that women have and girls have because of, I think social media is a huge part of that. And again, we talked about this earlier, but the perfect aesthetic that you see online and the perfect bodies you always are seeing online, you're comparing yourself to that. Your spouse isn't necessarily comparing you to that. You're comparing you to that. And that's especially tragic, right? Because it doesn't need to create friction in the marriage, but it can.
Most of the time I have people call my show men when they have cheated. I can't think, maybe I have. There's been, 500 plus episodes, so I can't go all the way back, but I can't think of a time when somebody said, hey, I cheated because my wife wasn't pretty anymore. It's almost always been because somebody else made me feel alive. Somebody else thought I was funny. Somebody else thought I was worth looking at. I was worth their time. And I think back to the times when I have felt insecure and I end up circling my own wagons and leaving my wife on an island, right? It has nothing to do with her. It has to do with I feel small or not enough, or, I'm not doing my job good enough, or I haven't been in the gym enough. I don't have a six-pack anymore, whatever the thing is, story I'm telling myself. And I project that onto her versus her coming to me and being like, man, I don't know, dude, you don't have that six-pack anymore like you did when you were 35. And so I again, I don't have any data, but I wonder how that works. But I think on my show, anecdotally, that's what I hear the most is my wife got distant. or we got distant together, and then this person at work made me laugh. This person at the mall like made me feel like I was pretty special.
Yeah, it's like that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that ounce of prevention and keeping the spark alive in your relationship. And my husband and I, early on in our marriage, getting great advice from people, it was really like weekly date night, have fun together, not just to talk about the business of the household, but like romance each other, like do stuff you enjoy, like stuff that you fell in love over when you were dating. Like that's not just a nice to have, that's a need to have in a marriage. Maybe it ends up being every 2 weeks. Okay. But like, that's a need to have. You need to create space in your marriage for the love and the leisure and the joy that you fell in love over, what that creates sort of the soft landing space. And yeah, there's seasons where that's more difficult than others and there's hardships that you face, but make that a priority in the marriage as opposed to an afterthought, because when it becomes an afterthought, we're mere human beings. We may find ourselves deeply attracted to this idea of it that we can find it somewhere else.
Well, and I think it's there's a great therapist named Terry Real who's wrote some really important books, but I think it was Real who was talking about that desire and that romance and safety cannot coexist. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. But the way you laid it out made a lot of sense. And that is, when you start dating, the romance is there. The attraction is 10 out of 10, right? You're all in. What you're practicing is safety. Are they going to show up when they said they were going to? Do they open the door for me? Who pays for dinner? If we get crossways, are they respectful of my ideas, or they say they're sorry? You're practicing safety. Then once you get married and you get down the road a little bit and you start to settle and feel safe, we don't have the alternative, which is we don't know how to practice romance. We just have sex. That's it. And if you don't have a game plan for, like you said, how do we laugh? How do we go do funny things? How do we do silly things? You end up, with the cancer of, well, we used to back in the day. Yeah, dude, that's biological. Your body was on fire, literally. And now it's not. And so it's not that something's broken. It's that you've established safety. Well, now from this position, you get to go down a rabbit hole together of what romance looks like and what exploration and curiosity and funny and, oh my gosh, that was a disaster. All those things together. And I like thinking of romance as not something that is inherent all the time. And when it runs out, like it's like gasoline in a car, that car's dead on the side of the road. No, dude, it's something you practice. You're constantly coming back. And by the way, when you're 40, romance looks different than when you're 30, than when you're 20, than when you're 16. It's not all one big continuous stream with the same definition. And by the way, romance looks different in my house than it probably does in your house, and it does in our friends' homes. And so it's something you practice together. And I can't think of a thing that's more fun to practice together than laughter and having fun and being intimate. That's the funnest thing to practice if you have the right mindset about it. If you think of it as, if I got to practice it, that means it's not real. Well, then there you go.
Well, it's such a good point, because you think about people that I think about myself before I got married, and I wanted so much. There's such a deep desire I had to be married and to find my one love and build a life and all of this, right? And then you get married, and I wake up each day and I'm like, I get to do this with my love. Like I get to create something with him that's beautiful, and that's actually part of my job description as a wife now, to create beautiful experiences for us. Find a way in all the challenges of life to have space for romance and for leisure together. And yeah, again, this is obviously hard at certain times and certain, challenges.
Yeah, some days
else.
I don't get to, I have to, right? Some days I have to love you, right? Because I said I would, right?
Well, I guess I'm still in the honeymoon phase. We're only 5 years in. So he's still like the best thing.
I'm 21. I'm 21.
That's impressive. It's impressive. But no, I think it's a mindset thing, right? It's a mindset thing of making the space and time for that. And then I love the fact that, there's 7 days in a week. And again, Christian perspective here, the seventh day, God rested, and he commands us to rest. What is rest? Well, for God, it was marveling and enjoying the creation, like enjoying the human beings he created. And for us, part of rest is worshiping God, enjoying God, and enjoying each other. So make that's a holy mandate to do that holy, worship of God, but then also enjoyment of creation and enjoyment of loved ones. And if that's practice in marriage, it's just a very preventative, I think, for all of the issues that can happen. Okay, so with the time we have left, we've talked a lot about, different relationship advice, which is all really good stuff. You've mentioned a few times resources. You talked about, talk to the 70-year-old, a couple that's been married 70 years, get their advice. What are some resources you would give people for how to have healthier marriages or prepare to have a healthy marriage?
I think we often treat marriage, I'll answer the question, but I want to give this picture. I think we often treat marriage like a basketball game where somebody has explained to us what basketball looks like and how you play it, but we've never seen a game. And then we walk into a gym and they flip the lights on and hand us a basketball and they say, go play. We taught you how to run the offense and how to shoot three-pointers and free throws and how to block and take charges. And you're like, what? Okay. And it just ends up chaos. Because millions and millions and millions of our fellow citizens did not have a good picture of what a good, healthy marriage looks like. And I also want to be really sympathetic and empathetic to our parents. My mom and dad, my mom, when they got married, my mom was not allowed to have a checking account per the federal government without my dad's signature on it. She was not allowed to get a mortgage without my dad's signature on it. That was in 1970 when they got married. She wasn't allowed to do that until 1973. So the fact that they went from that's the world they dated and got married in to now she is a tenured professor making more money than my dad and they're still married together and she travels all over the world in her 70s. They did a pretty freaking good job figuring that thing out. They changed the oil on that car while it was driving, right? I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, where are we getting our picture of what marriage looks like? And so I have found incredible value in having friends that were 10 or 15 or 20 years older than me who have good marriages that I want to have. They're not going to be exactly the same, but I want to emulate that. I want to feel like that. When I walk into their homes, I want my home to feel like that. I want my body to give me that signal. So what has to be true for that to happen down the road? So I think having good pictures and not getting them from Hollywood and not getting them from... I do this for a living, and I talk with people who are very fancy pants behind closed doors. Everybody is struggling. Everybody, 100% of people are trying to figure it out. And so don't imagine that everybody's life's perfect. It's just not. But find some real people that you can communicate with. That might be once a month, you'll go to dinner. That might be once a month, you meet with them. I have a group of guys who are 10 or 15, 20 years ahead of me that are married. They're great husbands. I want to be like them. They're great dads, and they're down the road from me. Cool, I want to be like that. So that's number one. Number two, constantly build into your calendar going back to the well together on a weekly basis. Every single week, let's sit down at the table and for 30 minutes, let's do a budget, because how you spend your money is going to dictate your values together. How are we spending money? How can I love you this week? What's our calendar look like this week? I have found that calendar time is like an aphrodisiac in my house. I always tell husbands, like, man, if you'll sit down and just plan the week out, your week will go good. And for most people, after about being married for 2 or 3 or 4 years, you got to start putting sex on the calendar. You got to put dates on the calendar. And it doesn't sound Hollywood, but the old marriage and family therapist question is, do you want to have sex on a calendar or do you want to have none at all? And that's your choice you get to have, right? So start making it a priority. You put your work meetings on the calendar. You put your trips to the dentist. Put something way more fun and important on your calendar, like intimacy, right? Begin to be intentional is the main word. And then in my house, one of the things that saved our marriage was asking, what does your picture of today look like? The great William Glasser is a psychiatrist. He passed away several years ago. He said he could fix most marriages in 1 to 2 sessions. And he was speaking hyperbolic, but with hyperbole. But here's what his main sentiment was: that we think in pictures, but we speak in words. And that's where almost every relationship falls apart. What does that mean? When my wife says, hey, I'm going to need some help today when you get home. Cool. My picture of what help looks like is after X and Y and Z is done in the house, and after this and this and this is over, then I'll do these little things. For her, help is at 5:01 when you walk in the door, I'm handing you a pizza coupon, and I may come back in a week, right? And so we both heard the words I need help, but we had very different pictures of what that meant. And so what happens is I love it when she goes away for the evening and just gets some time by herself, and I get to just be with the kids and we hang out and have a wild time. And I also love it when our house is in its regular routine. It's that we got cross. And so every day of our life, I ask my wife, what's your picture of today look like? And she'll be very clear, not just about times and dates, but about when we get home, here's what I'm going to need from you. And I say, awesome. Or I can't make that happen because I've got this. My picture of today looks like this. And we match our pictures up over and above our words. And I can't tell you how transcendent that has been. Your parents are coming over this weekend. What's your picture of that look like? Oh, I thought we were just going to sit around the house. And she's like, no, I thought y'all were going to go out and go downtown. And what is your picture of the holiday? What is your picture of this weekend? What does your picture of our date look like? You start asking that question on a regular basis, and it will transform your marriage from the inside out because it will clarify things.
So good. I love that. That's awesome. Okay, John, where can people find your work?
Like we mentioned a couple times, I host the Dr. John Delony Show. It's a podcast, comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and it's a blast. It's a caller-driven show. They call in, and they can find me there on YouTube and on podcast. And I host the Ramsey Show with Dave a few times a week. And you can follow me on the interwebs at John Delony. And hey, awesome. I'm really grateful for your hospitality. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And we'll link to your stuff too so people can find it. Thanks so much, John.
You betcha. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Lila Rose podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, do not forget to subscribe. Give us 5 stars if you're listening on Spotify or on Apple. And don't forget to hit the notification bell if you are listening and watching on YouTube. Also, we've just launched our new Locals community. Please join the Locals community. If you join as a member for $9.99 a month, so $10 a month, you get some special behind-the-scenes access. We will also be sending you a free downloadable copy of a chapter from my book that I never released, which I think is very cool. There's some other goodies on there too, so go check it out. And that link is in the bio. We'll see you next time.